Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jameson Cable, and over the next few months, we're going to have short, quick interviews with people who participated in, helped organize, and helped build the fort at Fort Logan. We want to bring as much attention to the fort and the things going on around there so we can keep the momentum going and get the fort completed. In today's interview, we're talking to David Coleman, manager of Fort Harrod. We'll have links in the description about how you can donate to help get the fort completed, how you can get involved, and how you can keep in touch with the events going on at the fort. So we're here at the Siege of Fort Logan event here in Stanford, Kentucky, and I'm joined with David Coleman of Fort Harrod. He's the manager of Fort Harrod. We're going to talk a little bit about just what we're doing here and also some big events coming up in Fort Harrod. So David, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Glad to be here.
Well, it's a little hot, but that's okay.
It's summer in Kentucky.
It's exactly,
so you get what you get.
We've mentioned this many times. It could rain, snow, sleet, hail, be 90, 30,
right.
Anything in a matter of...
All in the same day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but we're here in the Pettit Cabin here at Fort Logan, which is still under construction. We've not got it complete yet, but that's the goal. What's your role here during the siege and so forth?
At this event, I'm just a participant.
Mm-hmm.
My role at Old Fort Harrod State Park, I do as much reenacting as I can. Being a job like that, obviously I have a lot of weekends I work and events that I do myself, and I can only be gone from my home life so many weekends in a row. So by the time I work, 2 or 3 weekends a month at my job, it's kind of hard for me to carve out a weekend where I can go and play and do an event like this. Also, because I have responsibilities at the house I need to do. I don't get to do this as much as I'd like to. So when I do, I try to just be a participant like everyone else that arrives and try not to assert myself as someone that knows how to put this event on. But certainly if they ask for help, I'll be happy to jump in there and do whatever I can. But I'm not going to volunteer that if I don't have to.
Yeah. You're good with taking it easy on this one.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. It's a very big event, very good event. Really brings notification to one of the big events of Kentucky's history and a big settlement of Kentucky history. I've mentioned it and will continue to mention how much you know about Fort Harrod. You know about Boonesboro. You know about Daniel Boone. But lower on that list is Benjamin Logan and Fort Logan, and
right.
Just as much credit needs to be given and brought to life about the siege here and how it helped found Kentucky. However, at Fort Harrod, what are some things, I guess, that you would like, or that's going to be going on? I mean, annual things and just stuff in general.
Right. Of course, a little bit of history. Old Fort Harrod State Park commemorates the first permanent English settlement west of the Allegheny Mountains. James Harrod and his group of men founded Harrodstown June 16th of 1774, filed that paperwork with Virginia, had to abandon ship that winter. They fought in Lord Dunmore's War, and they returned early spring of 1775, again before anyone else was out here, and started Fort Harrod. The fort was the largest fort on the frontier. It was the first fort built on the frontier. When I tell people, I say it was the most important fort built on the frontier, and that doesn't take anything away from the other forts. But Fort Harrod was the county seat of Kentucky County, Virginia. It was where the official militia muster was. It was where the land office was, and it was where court was held. So that's why I tell, especially when we're doing introductions to school groups, I'll say this is the most important fort on the frontier. The size alone was immense in conjunction to these other forts. During the siege of 1777, the Bloody Sevens, Logan Station, where we are today, had 30 to 40 people in it, and Fort Harrod had over 300 jammed in there. So the size alone is just ridiculous. How big and how crowded it was, and of course that's how it was able to survive. Though, this was called Standing Fort, which is where Stanford gets its name because of the tenacity of the people that lived here. Just refused to give up and refused to surrender or even lose. We were a little bit fortunate at Fort Harrod because we had so many guns, we had so many people. But the downside of that is we had so many people. So the fort was packed, it was crowded, it was filthy, it was nasty. People were starving because there wasn't enough food. But with numbers comes power. Especially when you're fighting off 400 Shawnee. So if you can have 100 and 200 guns on the wall, that's a whole lot better than having 10 or 20 here at Logan Station. So
Well, and it goes to say, the importance of Fort Harrod. I mean, the people at Stanford went to Fort Harrod for protection.
Correct.
I mean, things were getting rough. And it's like, we got to go somewhere else. But like this, the survival necessities, how these forts all needed each other.
Right.
I think William Whitley and Benjamin Logan, they took their families there. The Pettits, I believe, as well. They all, for a time, went there until things were able to get calm and they were able to get their fort going.
And it's not an exaggeration to say that if Fort Harrod had fallen, that we may have lost the Revolutionary War. I mean, it was that pivotal. And I say that because, and the years after
people
that,
don't realize the western side of the Revolutionary
correct.
War at all.
These little stations out here, and especially after George Rogers Clark arrived, we kept the entire Shawnee Nation and most of the Cherokee Nation busy out here on the frontier. If we weren't out here, if these three little forts didn't survive, the entire force of the Shawnee Nation and the Cherokee would have joined the British on the other side of the mountains, and they easily would have changed the outcome of the Revolutionary War, and we'd still be driving on the left-hand side of the road.
Yeah,
so and our horses would be going clockwise. So it's not a stretch at all to think that these little forts. As a matter of fact, when I tell people at Fort Harrod, when we have school groups there, I interpret down at the spring myself. And we talk about the fact that Fort Harrod was the only fort on the frontier that had its own water supply inside of the fort. Yeah. Logan Station survived. They dug a tunnel out of their blockhouse into the woods, and they'd crawl through that tunnel back and forth to bring water, because the number one weapon of the natives were to burn the fort down. Yeah. Because it's made of wood. Duh. So they would have to bring in water to store, to put out fires with. But Fort Harrod didn't have that problem. We had a water supply inside of the fort, and we used it all of the time to put out fires with. Yeah. And of course, Boonesboro survived solely on the grace of God, because Blackfish had it surrounded. He had it on fire. Yeah. Everyone there was going to die. That's just a fact of the matter. Yeah. And then it started to rain, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained for 2 weeks before Blackfish got upset and went home. Yeah. That's the only reason Boonesboro survived. Yeah. So, if either one of these forts had fallen, like I said, the entire history of the Revolutionary War in the last 250 years would be completely different. So it really pivotal moment out here with these people, and we owe them so much. Every year at the Settlement and Raid at Fort Harrod, we have cemetery dedication by one of our historical preacher reenactors that come. Because the people laying out there in that cemetery, most of them just have an upturned field rock. And some of them are very tiny, but we don't know who that person was. But the very fact that they're in that cemetery tells me that we should honor them for coming out here on the frontier and doing what they did.
They sacrificed.
They sacrificed so much, and you don't know whether it was a 75-year-old man who died peacefully in his sleep, or was it a 10-year-old child who was caught and killed, or got smallpox, or so much as getting a scratch on the arm from a briar and getting an infection. They had no antibiotics or any way to fix it. Yeah. So you don't know who that person was. But the very fact that they're in that cemetery, they were some tough birds. Yeah, yeah. Well, and if you've ever visited Fort Harrod, which I've been many times, it is hard to imagine 300 people. In that fort. I mean, that would be... Now, the reconstructed fort's slightly smaller than the original. That one is actually about 205. They say 200, but I've measured it's actually like 205 both ways, square. The original one was 264, so it was another 60 feet bigger in each direction, which isn't a whole lot. 60 feet, that's a lot, but no, it's not really. That's not a lot when you're putting 300 people in there with no bathrooms. I mean, that's 30 yards, and that's not... And that's the kids' eyes get real big when I tell them. I was like, you mentioned 300 people in here all summer long with no bathrooms? I mean, it got nasty. Yeah. Yeah. And if you were lucky, you could do your business in a bucket and throw it over the wall. But most people were you just dig a privy ditch out in the middle of the greens there and go about it. There were no green at that point. Not 300 people in there, but
well, the one of my favorite spots in the fort is the Jane Coombs, blockhouse. I mean, being a teacher and just her story. I mean, it's awesome. Or telling as well as far as her sacrifice, but coming to Kentucky, being the first teacher. It's cool.
We do the James Harrod play in late July every year, and Jane Coombs, of course, is a character in that play. But Reverend Life mentions that right off the bat, that,
Yeah.
we should be building a church, and James Harrod is like, we barely have cabins out here. Churches are down on the list, my friend. But then when the second act starts and the women arrive, it's the first thing I'll mention is Jane Coon wants you to build a school. And he's like, what more can we do? We're building a fort. We're trying to survive out here. We got the Transylvania Company trying to rip us off. We got natives on one side and British on the other, and you want a schoolhouse? But Fort Harrod had one.
Yeah.
It was constructed inside the fort. It was the very first schoolhouse in the state of Kentucky.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that, I wish, Harrod and especially Jane Coombs had that desire to, hey, let's get some education in here and so forth. And then as Kentucky went, education fell kind of farther down the path as it went.
Well, I like to tell people that, that it's written in Van Cleve's journal that the schoolhouse had no chinking in the logs. Mm-hmm. And the theory behind that was Miss Coombs wanted fresh air to stimulate the children's thought. Mm-hmm. However, they worked on their farm all spring, summer, and fall, so they only went to school in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
So you got these children going to school in the dead of winter in a cabin with no chinking in the logs. And I'm like, but if they weren't, and you're like, why would even do that?
Yeah.
But if you weren't at school, you were working.
Yeah.
So it was a great honor to go to school.
Yeah.
First of all, most people couldn't read or write. Mm-hmm. And another thing I like to tell them as far as education goes, I was like, okay, your average person on the frontier couldn't read or write, and you would assume that means they have low intelligence.
Yeah.
In today's world, and also in today's world, if someone says, well, that person can speak 2 or 3 languages, you assume they're really intelligent.
Yeah.
Well, most of these people out here couldn't read or write, but they could speak multiple languages.
Yeah.
They spoke Algonquin, which is the Cherokee language. They probably spoke, the Shawnee language. They probably spoke another dialect of Algonquin the Cherokee spoke, and they spoke French for the most part, so they could trade, which is a trading language, and they obviously spoke the King's English.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they spoke multiple languages, even though they couldn't sign their name.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that shows in the intelligence.
And that's just what they were educated.
Yeah,
it had nothing to do with intelligence, just what they learned.
Yeah.
And to be fair, when you're out there on the frontier, knowing how to read didn't help you a darn bit.
Yeah, and not no signs.
Now, when you're trying to lay out property, that's another story.
Yeah,
and that's why, from 1775 to 1800, the number one business in Kentucky was surveying. And from 1800 to 1825, the number one business in Kentucky was lawyering to fix up all the mistakes that were made in the surveys. Not that the surveyors were bad; some of them were. They overlapped. I went to the creek, up to the big oak tree, and down to that big rock.
Yeah.
And the other guy was doing the same thing, but he was on this side of the rock, and you're on that side of the rock. And who owns the creek and all that jazz? Mm-hmm. But then. You had the clients who were hired these surveyors to do that surveying. They couldn't read the contract. They couldn't read the survey. They couldn't read the deed. They had no idea what they were looking at. They made an X where the mark was, and then the lawyers had to fix all that.
Yeah. Well, that's very true. That's exactly that's the way it went, and it shows just the struggle and the progress in a way as well as Kentucky went. So what dates do you all have coming up in Fort Harrod?
So Fort Harrod is June 18th and 19th.
The siege.
Let me make sure of that.
All right.
I checked that just before I came in here, but 18th and 19th. June 18th and 19th is the settlement and raid, which is our signature event. This will be our 13th year, 12th year.
Yeah.
12th year of doing the settlement and raid. Like I said, it's our signature event. It's a full-scale reenactment. We'll have presentations starting by 10 o'clock or so Saturday morning, and it'll run all day Saturday. Of course, the battle both days is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it goes on into the night. We'll have tavern night inside the, and that's exactly what it sounds like it is in the Ann McGinty Ordinary.
Yeah.
We have a bar set up in there, so we have tavern night in there, and it goes on late into the evening. We'll have live music, and it's a big time.
Yeah.
And anyone's welcome to come to tavern night. You don't have to drink. You can just come and enjoy the music and the camaraderie, and it's usually pretty hot in there. So we'll have tables set up outside, but it cools off when the sun goes down or gets late. And then Sunday morning we have church service down by the Big Spring. Mm-hmm. If you're unfamiliar with Harrodsburg, the Big Spring was where the original settlement was through in '74.
Yeah.
That was their base camp when they were surveying the original streets of Harrodstown. Incidentally, Daniel Boone was there in '69.
Yeah.
He knew where that spring was, and he spent the winter of '69 into '70, not 2 miles from that spring.
Wow.
So they're both very familiar with that area.
Mm-hmm.
And several years ago, a group in town, a nonprofit, had gotten permission and ownership of the spring, and we've cleaned it up. We used to have a fence around it, and we've cleaned it up. It's a little park down there, and it's really nice. So we go down there. We actually do have some reenacting events down there, but we go down there and have our church service there because, church service was under a big elm tree right there at the big spring. So we go down there every year and have the Sunday morning church service. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then just also, but that's, you can go to Fort Harrod. What is the open time season as far as?
We are open 9 to 5 Wednesday through Saturday and noon to 5 on Sunday, and that is our hours from March 1 until November 30th. In December, we're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then January and February, we're only open on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's kind of got the fault with the slide rule. We changed too much.
Yeah.
We have limited staff. There's only 2 of us there through the winter time.
Yeah.
So we can't be open 7 days a week or even 5 days a week. So
that's understandable.
And to be fair, when it's in February, you're not going to have a lot of visitation on Monday and Tuesday.
No.
So if you have any at all, it's going to be Thursday and Friday. And that's weather permitting.
Yeah. True. Other events? I know there's a play.
We do the James Harrod, The Battle for Kentucky, which is a play that was written by several of us that are involved with the play. Myself and Tegan Cox, who was then the managing director of the local theater. We decided we wanted to do a historical play in the amphitheater like had been done for 50 years prior.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to do the play that they had done, the Daniel Boone play, because this was Harrodstown. We wanted to do the story of Harrodsburg. We looked at doing the original play that was done was actually Home is the Hunter. We looked at doing that play, and we really wanted to tell the story of Harrodsburg, so we finally decided we were just going to write it ourselves. And after that, we brought on a couple more people to help us write the play. It changes every year. We add a scene. We take a scene out that depending on the actors that we get. Yeah. Some scenes we just can't work out. Yeah. So it kind of changes which is good because the visiting public don't want to see the same production every year. It's like going to the movies to see the same thing you saw 10 times, Yeah. So it changes every year. The director changes, the actors change, and even the scenes and lines change. So it's always a kind of a different but the same story. And that is the last 2 weekends in July. So this year it'll be July the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And July the 28th, 29th, and 30th. And it starts at 8 o'clock in the amphitheater. And it's a historical drama. It has some funny parts. It has some singing and dancing at the wedding, because we did the wedding of James Harrod and Ann McDonald. But it also has a lot of action. The scene that we added this year is the Battle at Point Pleasant, because we talk about it in the play, but we never see it. So we're going to actually show that a little bit of it this year, and the Shawnee surrendering and signing the treaty after that battle. We'll show that, and then we'll get into the second half. We have the big siege on the fort and capturing James McDonald and scalping him and burning him at the stake, and it's exciting, and then tears and funerals, and it's an exciting play, and we like people to come out. So.
Yeah, well, if you're in Harrisburg around that time, I would recommend checking it out. We might be there as well. Bring the kids out.
And we do other things there, like. One of our bigger events is actually the Haunted Frontier that we do, and it's a haunted house. It's a modern haunted house, so don't think you're coming to see, a reenactment haunted house. No, this is modern. You'll have zombies and
spooks and
scary clowns and things like that. But it goes on through the amphitheater in the darkness, and sometimes through the fort, depending on the actors we have and what path we want to take. We try to take a different path every year, so it's not the same. And again. We're subject to the volunteers that sign up to show up, so on what we can do. But it's always, like I said, it's one of our bigger events we'll do, because it'll be open 4 nights in late October. So, we'll have upwards towards 1,000 people come to the Haunted Frontier. And then we do in November we have an open house, which is the Saturday before Thanksgiving. We are always the first Christmas event, so to speak. And it's a holiday open house, and Santa Claus will be in the blockhouse. And where else can you take your child or your grandchild and have pictures taken in front of a real fireplace and a real log cabin, with a real cedar tree behind them? It's none of this fake picture stuff you get at the mall. It's the real McCoy, and we have free cake or cookies and punch and chocolate and stuff like that, and there's always live music. And this last year we did a winter encampment as well, so reenactors came and camped out. It was a good time. So, and that's depending on the weather. That's also very well attended. For that 2 hours, we'll push like 500 people through there, so it gets crowded.
Well, the next question is Harrodsburg has a birthday coming up, right?
We have several birthdays coming up. In 2024 is Harrodsburg's 250th. Of course, founded June 16th of 1774. So in 2024, that'll be our 250th, and there's a big committee for that, and we're planning one heck of a celebration there. We're going to concentrate on the 4 days: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Actually, June 16th is on Sunday that year, so that'll be the culminating event. We'll have live concerts, all kinds of historical stuff. The gentleman who James Harrod was in dispute with and went hunting with and disappeared from, we're actually going to put him on trial to see if there's enough evidence to convict him of murdering James Harrod. Of course, we don't know that he did, obviously, but we're going to try him anyway. And there's all kinds of cool events that we're going to do. It is very suspicious. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence there, so we're going to see if it's enough. And it's going to be like a real trial. We'll have a jury and a judge and lawyers and all that stuff. So it'll be pretty cool. But that's going to be a big event. We'll have live concerts all through the town, all the way from the Warehouse District to Main Street to Fort Harrod. And we're planning on having a lot of reenactors and different presentations at Fort Harrod, regardless of what else is going on in town. And lots of historical stuff. I know the Harrodsburg Historical Society is just got all kinds of programming planned for that weekend.
Well,
so
we want to get the word out now. You got 2 years in advance, so you can be there. There's no reason
and
you
the
can't.
The very next year is the 100th anniversary of Old Fort Harrod State Park in 2025.
There you go.
Fort Harrod, actually, the park itself was started in the late 1800s by the Pioneer Memorial Association, and they deeded that to the Parks Commission June 16th of 1925. So in 2025, Old Fort Harrod State Park becomes 100 years old. So lots of anniversary going on in Harrodsburg. And of course, then the next year you have the 250th anniversary of the nation.
Yeah. So wow.
In 2026. So.
Whew, yeah.
A lot to do. A lot of celebrating going on.
Yeah.
I might retire after that.
So. David, thanks again for joining us again. You will be hearing here soon, probably in a few weeks, me and David Kirkpatrick talking about James Harrod on a few episodes in the 1st of July. But again, I would encourage people to go to Fort Harrod now. Go now. And
absolutely.
Then you'll be ready here in 2 years to go to the big event.
Yeah, David Kirkpatrick is really taking the lead on all the stuff the Historical Society is doing. He is such an asset to them and to the world itself. Matter of fact, I don't know if he had help with it, but he's the driving force and the main author of the script for the putting the dude on trial. I can't remember the guy's name, but he'll insult me or admonish me later for not remembering the guy's name.
He's an asset to the podcast as well. He's got great a lot of good information, and especially early Kentucky history, which is what we've got going on the next few months. Is those early settlers: Benjamin Logan, James Harrod, Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton, Squire Boone, another one. Everybody talks about Daniel. Squire, just as important.
Yeah.
And more to come. So again, thanks for coming though. Thanks for sitting down with us, and good luck at the siege here.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to visit with you.
Don't forget to try out audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod to get a free book of your choosing. If you'd like to support the channel, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/KYHistoryPod. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification button for more Kentucky history content. Find us on these social media platforms and check out the Kentucky History Podcast on these podcast platforms for more in-depth history of Kentucky. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.